let's get into it. Now, we did see, I believe, let me see this. Did we talk about the World Bank and the IMF? We did, right? Did we? Yes, we did. We did all this. Okay. Interview with a Ukrainian socialist we did. Okay, here's where we're going to leave off. This is, I think, what it was. I think I remember. I think I found it. I found it. All right. So this article is Ukraine's national militia saying, we're not Nazis. We just want to make our country better. Spoiler alert, they are Nazis. Okay. So, in this section today, what we're talking about in regards to the Ukraine-Russia war is the section called the New Ultra-Right-Wing Post-Coup Ukraine. Just past midnight, in a snow-covered forest near Kiev, 4 men dressed in black with truncheons strapped to their waists listen carefully for the telltale buzzing of chainsaws that belong to illegal loggers. The police in our country are ineffective, corrupt, or drunk, says Zhenya, one of the men. That's why we have to deal with this problem ourselves. These woodland vigilantes, all in their early to mid-20s, are not your typical environmental activists. They are members of the National Militia, an ultra-nationalist organization closely linked to Ukraine's Azov movement. Now, today I will say one of the benefits of Burger Reich is that there was literally a Nazi in the chat using racial slurs and saying, Slava Ukraine, like Slava Azov. And I'm like, see? Excellent illustrating. Thank you for illustrating my point, right? A far-right group with a military wing that consists openly of neo-Nazi members and its political spin-off, the National Corpus Party. There's nothing inherently wrong with National Socialism as a political idea, said Alexei. And again, it's not actually socialism for anybody, right? That's being a Nazi. It's fascism. Another militia member, as the men move stealthily through moonlit trees frosted with ice. I don't know why everyone always associates it immediately with concentration camps. Probably because of all the concentration camps that the Nazis set up, would be my guess, or whatever. Besides illegal logging, the National Militia says it aims to crack down on street crime, drug dealing, and public alcoholism. And there are many of us. We are not scared to use force to establish a Ukrainian order, it said in a recent statement. They were going to force you to be Ukrainian nationalist fascists. On January 29th, hooded militia members turned up at municipal council meetings in Cherkasy and central Ukraine and reportedly refused to let officials leave the building until they had approved the city's long-delayed budget. The National Militia says its members are all volunteers and that expenses are covered by businesses and individuals sympathetic to its activities, including, we obviously know, Kolomoisky, the same Ukrainian-Israeli billionaire who backed Zelensky's presidential bid. National militia members include veterans of Ukraine's four-year war against Russian-led separatists. And again, remember this. We talked about this last time. When you read Russian-led separatists, you kind of just think Russia. You don't think too much about it against Russians. Yeah, these are not Russians. These are Ukrainians. These are Ukrainians who disapproved of the new right-wing government and thought that it would be better for their territory to secede and go to Russia, where they would not be messed with, because the new government was messing with them, was trying to basically introduce all of these laws that would amount to ethnic cleansing in the territory and stuff. So the way they word this, Russian-led separatists, they never just say a separatist movement, right? A cessation movement, other Ukrainians, a civil war, and it's intentional. They really, the West wants you to think that it's big bad Russia versus everybody in the world. And so you might be mad at these people for being Nazis, but, well, they're fighting Russia, and Russia's just as bad. This is the mentality you're supposed to take from us, editorially. Yeah, Larry says also, Ukrainians and Russians as people don't see themselves as separate like the West imagines. And this is true. And Putin has actually said this, been like, we're the same people. And the West instead interpreted that to mean that Putin wanted to take over all of Ukraine and use it to expand the Russian Empire or something. No, they're literally like 80% of people in Ukraine speak Russian. They really are a similar people. Yeah, it's me. Hey, what's up? So they say, as well as former football hooligans who took part in Ukraine's 2013-2014 revolution. It was a coup. Some are straight-edge fitness fanatics who neither drink nor smoke. They sound right to me for fascists. Many have no memory of life in the Soviet Union, having grown up in an independent Ukraine where trust in law enforcement agencies remains low despite recent police reforms. The police reforms were like pouring chocolate on shit, said Alexei, after he and his fellow militia members had abandoned their unsuccessful search for illegal loggers. It's still shit, Although the national militia has been operating for a year, even conducting street patrols in towns and cities under Ukrainian government control. Really think about this. Right? They're Nazis. They're openly Nazis. They're telling you they're Nazis. They want to do National Socialism. They want to enforce this. They're conducting street patrols in towns and cities under Ukrainian government control. And this has been an issue that we've seen over and over again. People are like, is this your government or not? And Ukraine's like, kind of. And then eventually what do? They just incorporate them in and they're like, yeah, they're us. That's fine. So the group entered the spotlight late last month when about 600 of its members marched through central Kiev. Some wore camouflage gear, while others dressed in black with balaclavas covering their faces. The provocative show of strength culminated at a torch-illuminated fortress where militia members swore oaths of allegiance to Andrei Beletsky, the ultra-nationalist MP who heads the National Corpus Party. So again, we've said this before, but the liberals are falling for MAGA January 6th style movement propaganda all around the world, and this is an example of it. They've even got the fucking torches. Like, come on, man. It's the same shit. I know, straight edge mentioned. And this is why you always drink and do drugs, kids. This is the path straight edge leads you down. You know, first thing you know, you're just like kind of maybe in a bad emo band, hardcore band, right? And next thing you know, you're a Nazi in Ukraine. So that's the danger of the straight edge movement. Tell all your friends. Truncheon, balaclava. How do you guys say truncheon, balaclava, balaclava. Balaclava is more fun to say anyway. I've always said balaclava. I'm saying choose drugs so you don't become a Nazi. That's all I'm saying, okay? All right, it shouldn't be controversial. I don't know why you guys are acting like that's a weird thing to say. So, when the authorities are impotent and cannot solve issues of vital importance for society, then simple, ordinary people are forced to take responsibility upon themselves, Beletsky told Ukrainian media. Beletsky has toned down his rhetoric in recent years, but the former Azov battalion commander declared in 2010 that the Ukrainian nation's mission was to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. Right? Yeah, this is his whole thing. He loves it. So again, this is the guy who says the mission is to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. This is the guy that they all swore their oaths of allegiance to with fucking torches, right? It's not sounding good. And again, these are the people now under Ukrainian government control. Part of the Ukrainian government, these people. No big deal. Probably fine. Probably nothing to worry about if you're a liberal, right? But Russia's the bad guys. Okay. So while Ukrainian law allows unarmed civilian organizations to assist law enforcement agencies, for many observers, this ceremony in Kiev was reminiscent of 1930s Germany. Yeah, no shit. And kindled fears that Ukraine's shaky democracy, not a democracy, it was a coup, was in danger of being hijacked by an increasingly confident far right. It already was. It is, yeah. So National Corpus and other far right parties are polling at less than 5% in elections, but they already clearly have government power. This is state sanctioned that they're doing this. But analysts say they could exploit Ukraine's economic and social instability to boost their electoral chances. We are concerned about rising nationalism in Ukraine and the government's seemingly unwillingness to rein it in. Ukraine's international donors and supporters should be very worried, said Tanya Cooper, Ukraine researcher for Human Rights Watch. Now, again, Human Rights Watch, they're like in the West Pocket. But remember what I've said in previous episodes. Europe, as much as there's white supremacy and far-right extremism in Europe, they do not fuck with Nazi symbolism or iconography specifically. Probably not because they actually care about people wanting to build an ethno-state, but because specifically Nazi Germany fucked over so many of them. It's like a political enemy to them. So even like Western liberals, you know, they will still have to come down on this because of the blatant use of Nazi iconography. If these guys didn't use Nazi iconography, I don't think that Human Rights Watch would even be talking to them. If they had all the same policies and everything, but they didn't use any of the aesthetics of Nazis, they'd probably be fine with it. They'd be totally fine with it, right? She's judged to be a Nazi? Excellent clip. Definitely not getting canceled for that take. National militia's officials say that concerns are unwarranted. If the world is worried about the threat of Ukrainian neo-Nazism, I can assure you we are not neo-Nazis. We just want to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against Semite-led Untermenschen. Why would you think we're Nazis? Great. Real good. I can assure you, we are simply people who want to change our country for the better, said Ihor Vdovin, a spokesman for the national militia. We don't want to establish some kind of white order. No, because it's not a white order. It's a Ukrainian order. It's very specific. Other white people don't even count to them. When they went through the streets, remember in the last weeks, who were they looking for? Russians. Russians weren't even right for them. Those were white people, right? He might be memeing. Yeah, maybe he is. It's not white. It's European. And it's not even European. It's Ukrainian. They didn't even like the other Europeans. They're like, we'll ally with you for now, but then all bets are off. That's why I think it's so funny when, like, Poland and Ukraine are fighting. I'm like, oh, God. There's just, like, two of the worst guys you know in beef with each other. It's horrible. So, I was going to make a really edgy video yesterday about Latvia, Lithuania, Croatia, Poland, and Ukraine, and I was like, they're definitely not ready for that. They're definitely not ready for that. Okay, so people got frightened when they saw how organized and disciplined the march in Kiev was. Yeah, it's fucking scary as shit. This is a high-ranking member of National Corpus speaking named Stephen Holovko. I do have extra syllables. But why should we apologize for the fact that our people can carry out the tasks they've been set to? It's like, yeah, they were more scared because of the ideology, I think. Azov National Corpus has been linked to Arsen Avakov, the Ukrainian interior minister who's seen as a possible successor to Petro Poroshenko, Ukraine's unpopular president. Avakov has quelled speculation that the national militia is its own private army, saying he would not allow parallel structures to challenge the authority of the police. Vyacheslav Alitkachev, the head of the National Minority Rights Monitoring Group, suggested the militia's activities were aimed at making National Corpus stand out from rival ultranationalist parties ahead of next year's parliamentary elections. And remember, this is so popular, this right-wing ideology here, there are rival ultranationalist parties. They have more than one, basically, neo-Nazi party running around at this time. The quote is, they are trying to prove they have more hardcore activists and can mobilize at a street level. Now, this came out in March of 2018. Okay? So, good context for us. And the next article, and again, remember, all the liberals like to tell you this is all Russian propaganda. Who's that? We read that frame. It was literally The Guardian. This is literally Washington Post. So there was a period of time before 2022 when even Western media was reporting on this stuff more regularly. You can find it. So Ukraine turns a blind eye to the ultra-rightist militia. This came out in 2017, so around the same time period. A jeep hurtles down a long potholed road toward the front line. Inside, Michel, Monarch, and Dynamo balance their assault rifles between their legs. The mood is upbeat. It's been days since these militiamen traded fire with their enemy entrenched across no man's land. They approach a Ukrainian army checkpoint surrounded by untended fields. This should be as far as these three gunmen get. The red and black flag fluttering from their SUVs shows they belong to Right Sector, an ultra-nationalist group of paramilitaries banned from the battlefront. Now, again, the red and black flag, you probably saw that a lot in the video footage we watched last week too. It's literally blood and soil. That's literally like Nazi shit. It's like blood and soil, just for anybody who doesn't know. But the guards wave them through. They drive on to join other members of Ukraine's secret army holding the line on their country's eastern frontier. Officially, we are not here, says Monarch, a joyless man in his 30s, who, like the others, insists on being identified only by his nom de guerre. Politicians say we've drawn, but things are different in the East. We have a good relationship with the soldiers. We share the same enemy. We're Ukrainian partisans, Misha adds. Politicians are scared that once the war ends, we'll return to Kiev and turn our guns on them. And we should. We need to. Now remember, from the jump, all of these neo-Nazi militias, they never really had exactly the same interests as the billionaires, as the rich businessmen who wanted Ukraine to turn towards the EU and the United States. And they were vocal about this from the jump. They were like, look, we'll help you win this revolution to get away from Russia, but as soon as we win, and we will win, we are going to come to Kiev and come for you next, because we will be in control of this country. So right now, what we have between the neo-Nazis and the rest of the right-wing government, and don't be confused, it is an extremely far-right government that they have. But, they're not neo-Nazis necessarily. They are a convenient marriage, right? They're a marriage of convenience, right? So they have the same common enemy right now, which is Russia, because there are so many ethnic Russians within the borders of Ukraine. For the neo-Nazis, that was their first enemy. The Russians, the Jews, the Jews even a little bit less. The Russians and the communists is who they wanted to go after. So he's right when he says this. Right now, they have a common enemy. But in the end, we'll return to Kiev and turn our guns on them as well. So despite Kiev's pledge to rein them in, rogue militias continue to fight against Moscow-backed separatists. Again, other Ukrainians. This is a civil war. Why this is not positioned in Western media as a civil war is frankly fucking insane. Nobody's like they're having a civil war. No. It's Moscow-backed separatists, once again. When war erupted in 2014, Ukraine's army was on its knees after decades of corruption and neglect. So the top brass joined forces with volunteer battalions to counter the pro-Russian insurgency. Other Ukrainians. But these informal groups proved difficult to control, with some committing heinous abuses. Almost all have been incorporated into Ukrainian state forces. True. One major group refuses to submit, Right Sector. This organization was formed during the 2013-2014 Euromaidan Revolution coup from hardened protesters and far-right fringe parties. And remember, they were backed by the U.S. government. This is who, when we saw those videos and pictures of John McCain and Victoria Nuland going to Ukraine and meeting with people during the revolution, this was them. Analysts say Right Sector has thousands of members, including hundreds of armed men deployed alongside Ukrainian government troops. Despite official claims to the contrary, fresh recruits continue to arrive and operate with regular troops. It's generally understood the army controls Right Sector fighters, says Vyacheslav Likachev, an analyst of right-wing radicalism. Their every step is coordinated with Ukraine's commanders. Ukraine's defense ministry did not respond to a request for comment. For now, Kiev benefits from these guerrilla units. They're highly motivated, and they don't qualify for state pensions. Longer term, the government is playing with fire. Right Sector's existence undermines Kiev's standing with Europe. Yes. If peace talks ever gain momentum, this group probably would reject any compromise and could push a volatile region deeper into conflict. But with fighting picking up along the front here, just at the moment when many Ukrainians have been worrying that President Trump's desire to reset relations with Russia will cast their country into the cold, there's little likelihood that Kiev will move anytime soon against the Right Sector fighters. They were admired for their fierce dedication, but belligerent statements and menacing demonstrations have sullied the group's reputation. Russian state media demonize the organization and exaggerate its importance, painting it as the military wing of a fictional fascist junta. I mean, they're actually correct, though. It is part of the military, yes, of an actual far-right proto-fascist government, yeah. Moscow has freely exploited Ukraine's troubled history with the extreme right. Some Ukrainian nationalists fought alongside the Nazis during World War II, but others committed atrocities alongside the Germans. Fought against the Nazis. Yeah, so this is true. So the others committing atrocities against the Germans, though, that's literally, UPA-OUNB. The Maverick organizations does contain neo-Nazi elements. It also has fighters with no far-right sympathies, all despise Ukraine's corrupt officialdom. Volunteer units guard at the little town of Marinka, living in squalid abandoned cottages at a position overlooking separatist-held Donetsk. Separatist-held Donetsk. The people of Donetsk. Separatist hell. That's just the people who live there, who don't want to be a part of Ukraine anymore because your shit is fucking scary and far right and freaky. These Nazis are pretty cost-effective, really underlining material interests, Culty Moose says. Yeah. And this is why ideology at the end of the day matters less than material reality. So, Giuseppe Dona's, two foreigners stand out. An Italian neo-Nazi and a young Dutchman. The two share a thirst for adventure and a total ignorance of the local language. So we talked about this a little bit, but this really became a hub for Nazis around the world to go to Ukraine to fight. Giuseppe Donan's t-shirt echoes a Nazi-era war flag, emblazoned with the word hatred. Despite his extreme ideology, he is disarmingly affable. What prompted him to enlist? This is Europe, my house. Big governments don't let us fight, he says. He complains that Europe is losing its identity to Muslims and African immigrants and maintains that Eastern Ukraine is the place to take a stand. Something big is happening here. It is worth fighting for. Yikes. The 47-year-old married father of two has worked in private security in Angola, Iraq, Sudan, and Syria. Every few months, he takes leave to join pro-Ukrainian battalions. He does this for fun. This is funsies for them. My family don't support me, but they try to understand, he says. It's tough, though, an eternal conflict. He doesn't worry that his presence could lead to credence to the Kremlin lines about fascists fighting for Ukraine. Oh my God, my eyes. Russia doesn't need to fill my t-shirt to feed their propaganda, he says. They'll say whatever they want. I mean, they're right. Look, what? Their propaganda, they're right. It's not a lie. It's just crazy, right? Like, they don't need to fill my t-shirt to call us all Nazis. They could though, because you're a Nazi. Like, what? This is so crazy to me. Nearby, Sjord Heger, 22, grasps an AK-47 assault rifle and surveys no man's land through orange-tinted glasses. Yeah, these lies, which are true. Thank you, username, mame. A former trash collector and call center worker, he is the butt of relentless teasing as an archetypal war tourist. My mom doesn't know I'm here. Maybe I'll send her a photo of a grenade. She's used to me disappearing, he says. Here's combat training consisted of firing off just 4 magazines. His instructor taught him first aid, but I didn't understand half of what he said. It is a quote. This kid's gonna die. The unit's commander welcomes such adventurers. The more the better, says Vano, 28, whose real name is Ivan Borisenko. Sure, the Dutch kid doesn't know how to use his weapon. He'll learn soon enough. They're sending these, like, Dutch Nazi teenagers, sorry, he's 22, young adults, to slaughter. 2 men from the Caucasus nation of Georgia, Alkandil and Viktor, hold a neighboring position. Since the 1990s, they've fought against Russia in conflicts scattered around the former Soviet Union, and Abkhazia, Chechnya, South Ossetia, and now Donbass. You guys have me really, like, thinking I'm adding extra syllables to every word now. It was, like, too real. It was, like, called out too real, and now I'm like, Caucasus. What if it's not that? What if it's Caucasus? With his bushy white beard and bulging belly, Victor, 56, resembles Santa Claus in camo. Here, we have one enemy, says his compatriot Alkandil, 47. I hope one day this war will end. I hope one day to hang up my weapon and return home. But while Russia threatens these lands, I will have no peace. Russia is not threatening the lands, right? It's people in Ukraine who don't want to be a part of Ukraine anymore. And what's crazy is, like, the Nazis don't actually want these people to be a part of Ukraine either. They want the people to leave. They want the Russians to leave. The ethnic Russians in Ukraine, they want them to leave, but they want to keep the land. And that's really what this comes down to. An hour's drive from Marinka, in a rundown warehouse that serves as a right sector base, several dozen fighters distract themselves from the tedium of protracted war, cleaning weapons, working out, or drinking. Rusted trucks litter the yard. Patriotic heavy metal blares through dank corridors. A former history teacher services a Soviet-era rocket launcher on a pool table. Right sector source of firepower are obscure, but have been boosted by black market deals, battlefield spoils, and raids on arsenals. Beyond the base, PR is not top priority. We don't get on with civilians here, says Misha Ukman, a former journalist who's in the group's media officer. We don't have time for winning hearts and minds. There's a war to fight. Right sector's opposition to Ukraine's ruling elite and desire to revolt is a gift for the Kremlin. These dissidents could be exploited by the very enemy they fight. Right-wing radicals are fertile ground for Russia's campaign to destabilize Ukraine, says political analyst Likhchachev. Their ideology is inherently anti-Russian, but shares common goals with Moscow. What? Their ideology is Russian, but shares common goals with Moscow? What is the fucking, like, I'm like the meme right now of the lady with all the stuff behind her, like, what? How? Just because you said? Just because you don't like both of them? What does it fucking mean? It's just because they don't like both of them. Regardless, rogue militants such as Misha think that this war could have no political solution. We need another revolution, he says. Politicians steal and steal. We cannot trust them. This is our land. We will fight to the end. Lenin smash. They constitutionally voted to secede, yes, and Kiev was like, but we didn't get to vote, and then started bombing their own people. Exactly. This is exactly what happened. A territory of people voted to secede. It won. Because you were saying, get out, get out, get out. And they were like, okay, fine, we'll get out. And then you were like, wait, no, fuck you. We want to keep the land, though. And then started bombing and trying to kill people there. It's insane. Wild. Okay, so that's what's going on according to the Washington Post. Now, Human Rights Watch, as they mentioned, had been talking about this. So here's a story they have. A Ukrainian court penalizes a news outlet for calling a far-right group neo-Nazi. So they really start trying to control the narrative. So we talk about how much are these people in with the Ukrainian government, right? Okay, fine. So we've got some Nazis running around, but he's not the Ukrainian government. Well, let's talk about that relationship. So, this is from Human Rights Watch, which is notoriously not very pro-Russia, certainly not very pro-left. Ukrainian court penalizes news outlet for calling far-right group neo-Nazi. According to Kiev, ruled in favor of a Ukrainian far-right nationalist group, C14, in its defamation suit against the internet TV station Hromadski.tv after the outlet published a tweet referring to C14 as a neo-Nazi group. The judge accepted C14's claim that the tweet caused reputational damage and ordered Hromadski to retract the statement and pay a fine. The August 6th decision caused outrage among Ukraine's human rights activists and journalists, and rightly so. C14 members have openly expressed neo-Nazi views and attacked women's rights activists, LGBT activists, and Roma families. In the spring of 2018, members attacked a Roma camp in Kiev, burnt down tents, and chased out its residents, including women and children. This is a Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty story, but yeah, it's even while that they were reporting on it back in the day. That's the U.S. government, for anybody who doesn't know. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, that's the U.S. government. So back in the day, even we were reporting it. 2022 happens, though, and now all of a sudden the news has changed. And now the American government wants you to think Ukraine's perfect and has never done any wrong, right? So, funny how those things happen. Also, what I want to point out here, bringing up the Roma camp, I don't know how to effectively communicate this point, but because this is former USSR territory, and a lot of these relationships came from the USSR era, because the Nazis running through the streets calling to get the ethnic Russians out of their land in Ukraine, also were calling to death to communists because they associated the two in their minds. I think it's worth pointing this out, that when you start to realize that it was ethnic minorities in communism that had the highest approval ratings of communism, and it was the ethnic majorities who were more likely to disapprove of it, all of this stuff starts to really make a lot more sense, because we all know Marxist-Leninism has the framework that Lenin introduced with the right to self-determination for oppressed people, and this is heavily utilized in communism. And this framework is actually very, very beneficial for people who've experienced historic oppression. So just reading this about the Roma camp in Kiev, this never would have happened during the USSR, right? And so my partner's family, who were from the USSR, they're Roma. They're Romani people, right? And they're from Belarus. And it's my partner's grandmother who, when my partner teases me, is like, talking to you is just like talking to my grandma. Like, Stalin can do no wrong. You love the USSR. Blah. And they're like teasing me, But it's true. Mr. Will understand the delicate framework of multiple ethnicities who have complicated histories, sometimes going back. You have people who've been targeted over and over and over again with systemic abuse and oppression. And just knowing that under the USSR, under socialism and communism, these people were kept relatively safe. It's not like prejudice didn't exist, but, these kinds of things weren't happening to them. And it's very, very sad. It's just another point reading this and be like, God, this would not have happened if the USSR was still around. So the group, which has openly promoted hatred and racial discrimination, was not shy about its members' actions. The group took responsibility for the attack, and their leader promised more in the future. Obstis says, that's why people in the U.S. are so scared of equality. The majority will feel oppressed when others are lifted because they've never encountered systemic anti-supremacy before. Exactly. The group, which has openly promoted hatred and racial discrimination, we said that, took credit for the attack. Protection of freedom by expression has been steadily deteriorating in Ukraine, just as violence by far-right groups like C14 has increased. Since when, I wonder? What changed that made that happen in 2019? I wonder if anything recently happened, like within the past 5 years, that would have made protection of freedom of expression steadily deteriorate as violence by far-right groups increased in Ukraine. I don't know, maybe like a coup happened that the right-wing freaks in power? Ukraine's activists and journalists have repeatedly urged the government to adopt a zero-tolerance stance towards violence, threats, and intimidation from these groups. Instead, Ukraine's authorities have focused on introducing restrictions on freedom of expression that they justify by citing the ongoing armed conflict and the need to counter Russian propaganda. And it's just the truth. We saw what that guy said. He's like, they don't need a picture of my Nazi shirt to call us Nazis. They're just going to say it anyway. Yeah, it's just the truth. Ukraine has every right to stand up to Russia's military actions, but when the government makes unjustifiable curbs on freedom of expression in the name of national security and radical nationalist groups are allowed to continue committing hate violence with impunity, those groups only become further emboldened. It emboldened C14 in particular as the group hunts down Russia-backed separatists, they put it in quotes, fighting in eastern Ukraine, and reportedly received government funding to carry out national patriotic education campaigns. So, C14... fighting down Ukrainians in eastern Ukraine who feel unsafe, and they receive government funding to do their own propaganda, their own right-wing propaganda. As the OSCE media freedom representative was quick to point out, the court ruling harms freedom of expression and might have a dissuading effect on journalistic work. Hromadsky's editors and lawyers challenged the court's decision as illegal and said the station will appeal. The question is, while this ruling stands, can the Ukrainian press do its job and continue reporting on violence by radical far-right groups without calling them out for what they are? Okay, so interesting contradictions happening within the world of European liberalism. Right? Why would you wear a Nazi shirt? I know, he loved it. He's like, I'm Team Nazi, put me in, coach, I'm ready. All right, so now we have this next article from Reuters, famously also Russian propaganda, right? Ukraine passes language law, irritating president-elect and Russia. Now, I tell people this happened, and they're like, that never happened. I don't know why people believe this didn't occur. It occurred. It was very well documented. Ukraine's parliament approved a law on Thursday, this is 2019 as well, that grants special status to the Ukrainian language and makes it mandatory for public sector workers, a move Russia described as divisive and said discriminated against Russian speakers. So I just want you to, the last article is 2019 too, so just take a second with me to imagine. you're in Ukraine. It's 2019. C14, a neo-Nazi group, is not only going around stopping LGBT groups from showing anything, displaying the fact that they're gay, doing pride, whatever, attacking women, attacking ethnic minorities, Roma camps, families, right? They're getting government funding to do it. And then your parliament passes a law controlling if you're allowed to speak your native language or not, or where, or how. This is a really insane political climate to be living in. And this is 2019. This is crazy that all this is happening at the same time. And it's easy to hear about it as though it's history, but this was 7 years ago, right? And imagine this all actually happening to you at the same time. And remember also that in 2013, Ukraine was not like this, right? It was not like this. It was relatively stable. They had good relationships with Russia. If you were of a Russian ethnicity or spoke Russian, that was considered normal and fine there. It was not that big of a deal. Obviously, maybe there was a little bit of tension between people in the East and the West, but no different than people in the North and the South and the United States, and probably a lot less racially motivated there even. So this was a major switch up to be happening to these people living there at this time, right? Maurer says East Ukrainians laughed when you were trying to learn Ukrainian out of respect for their culture rather than just learning Russian. Yeah, a lot of them spoke Russian. Yeah, and N7 Rogue Hunter says you have to remember 2014, Obama was president, all the liberals are out to brunch and not watching the news. Nobody knew about Ukraine. So true. Yeah. So the law, which obliges all citizens to know the Ukrainian language and makes it mandatory requirement for civil servants, soldiers, doctors, and teachers, was championed by outgoing President Petro Poroshenko. Now, Poroshenko, he was kind of the West's guy. I'm gonna double check this. Hold on. Marina Poroshenko. Hold on, I gotta figure out what this guy's wife did. Dude, my allergies are going off right now. I don't think this is the one. Maybe she's not the one. Just want the reference point. Okay, no, she's not the one that was the State Department chick. I'm trying to remember who that was. Did you remember who the State Department lady was? I'm looking it up. I just want to know. No, they're talking about Zelensky's wife taking meetings, but that's not right. Olena, no, not Olena. Sorry, little distraction for a second though. Ugh, I'm never gonna be able to find it. I'm gonna have to listen to my own podcast to find it again. I'm not finding it. That's okay. Little divergence. It's in my podcast. If anybody's curious about that tidbit, there's 8 hours of podcast content, and we basically propped up one politician there whose partner was from the State Department, which is pretty wild. Whatever the case, he's expected to sign it into law before he leaves office in coming weeks after losing re-election on Sunday to Zelensky, an actor who mainly speaks Russian in public. Ukrainian is the predominant language in Western Ukraine, while Russian is the predominant in much of the East. Both languages are spoken widely in the capital Kiev, and a large proportion of the population speaks both fluently. Television is often bilingual, with talk show hosts and their guests slipping between the two languages, sometimes asking questions in one and answering them in another. Language has become a much more sensitive issue since 2014, when a pro-Russian president was toppled in a popular revolt, and Russia responded by annexing the Crimea region and backing a pro-Russian separatist uprising in the east. Reuters, very interesting language to describe this. Not how I would describe it. I would say language has become a much more sensitive issue since 2014, when the democratically elected president of Ukraine was toppled in a U.S.-backed coup led by far-right extremists in the region, and people of the Crimea region responded by having a formal election to secede from Ukraine and instead join Russia, and people in the East followed suit. That's how I would word that, for the sake of accuracy, right? But no, that's not the way we're told this. The separatists argued in part that Easterners were victims of growing discrimination against Russian speakers. Some Ukrainian speakers argue that the prominence of Russian is a legacy of the Soviet era that undermines Ukraine's identity. On Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed an order simplifying the procedure for obtaining a Russian passport for residents of eastern Ukraine's rebellious regions. Rebellious regions, as though they're petulant children and not people terrified for their lives. Prompting calls from Kiev for more international sanctions. So just to, imagine if North Korea did this, right? So imagine if South Korea was like, we're making it easier to get a passport in South Korea if you're from the North. And then North Korea was like, wanting to get sanctioned for this activity or something, or North Korea was calling for them to get sanctioned or punished in some way. Like, this would be crazy. This would be, like, insane. For the hypocrisy here is just, like, off the charts, right? So they're mad at Russia for basically allowing people from eastern Ukraine to have a Russian passport if they want and, like, be a Russian citizen. Like, how do you have the right to control that, right? It's just crazy. Posture check. Poroshenko put promotion of the Ukrainian language at the heart of his unsuccessful re-election campaign. Zelensky, who played a school teacher turned president in a Russian language comedy series on Ukrainian TV before launching his political career, said on Thursday that his team would examine the new law to see if the rights of all citizens were respected. We must initiate and adopt laws and decisions that consolidate society and not vice versa, he wrote on Facebook. Also, just going back to this passport thing, and like the idea that like Putin didn't try diplomatic measures, right, is crazy. And this doesn't even force anybody to do anything. It's just if you want a Russian passport and you live in this region, you can get one. It's like so menial. That has nothing to do with the Ukrainian government at all. People would have to want that to get it, right? And he's like, if you want it, come get it. So Viktor Medvedchuk, a prominent figure in Ukraine's Russia-friendly opposition, said it violated the constitutional rights of millions of Ukrainian Russian speakers. The new legislation requires TV and film distribution firms to ensure 90% of their content is in Ukrainian, and for the proportion of the Ukrainian language printed media and books to be at least 50%. Computer software must also have a Ukrainian language interface, although the law also allows the use of English or any other official language of the European Union. So Russian, not allowed. English and hydrate. Fine. Okay, so lawmakers gave a standing ovation after the law was passed and sang the national anthem. Hundreds of people with Ukrainian flags had gathered outside Parliament to support the law. So I like to tell people, imagine we start regulating where Spanish can be spoken in the United States. And that's while ICE is running around abducting people who look like they're from Latin America or speak Spanish. You would very obviously think that was super fucking crazy and racist if the United States passed that law. That's what's going on here. All right, so moving along next. Ukraine then bans the Communist Party. So they start making it illegal to have left-wing politics in Ukraine next. God, my allergies are so bad. How's the pacing going for everybody? Is it too fast? I'm a little, like, caffeinated today, so I'm higher quicker. Is it okay? Give me your feedback after emote-only chat is over. A based babushka granny here with Stalin pick. A State Department person. Thank you. It's Katerina Yushchenko. Thank you, Yushchenko. Pace is good? Okay, good. So here we go. A Ukrainian Communist Party member holds a portrait of Stalin during a rally in 2005. Now, think about the caricature that the right would like to give you of what a Ukrainian communist might look like. Picture it. Picture what you're meant to think a communist would look like, right? It's this lady. This is a woman who is a Ukrainian Communist Party member, right? That's her. That's your average Eastern European communist. All of the memes about Eastern Europeans versus, Western leftists having wildly different opinions, they have the same opinion. We have the same opinion as this lady, as base babushka granny. We have the same opinion on politics as this lady. Older people who experienced communism miss it. It is only younger people who are infatuated with mythology of capitalism because they grew up being heavily propagandized by the United States, by the West, who think that communism is bad. The people who lived through it, they like it. She likes it. She wants it back, right? Right. So this is all of our base babushka granny. We love her. The Communist Party of Ukraine has been banned after a Kiev court upheld a government lawsuit accusing the party of promoting separatism and inter-ethnic conflict. This lady's political beliefs have been banned. This lady who wants to go back to the type of government they had before the West started meddling, she has been banned. Her politics have been banned. The decision announced by Kiev's District Administration Court on Wednesday has been criticized by human rights campaigners who describe it as a flagrant violation of freedom of expression and association. The move prevents the party from operating and participating in elections. In May, Ukraine adopted controversial decommunization laws, which outlawed the display of Soviet symbols and prohibited the use of the term communist. You cannot even say you're a communist in Ukraine, all right? This is from 2015. Now imagine you're 22 years old in Ukraine today, right? This law was passed when you were 11. You have not grown up in a Ukraine where you are allowed to talk about communism. This, not allowed. So, you're not allowed to hear good things about communism. And you are expected to have an accurate understanding of your country's history, of the politics of your country, of what's going on there. When you talk to the average Ukrainian person under the age of 35, I usually say, they are so heavily propagandized and indoctrinated. It is just as bad as talking to an American. It is just as bad as talking to a Polish person. It's just as bad as talking to a Latvian person, a Lithuanian person, a Croatian person. They are extremely propagandized about their history and their culture. They don't know what's going on in their country. They have no idea. They can't even talk about it in the news. They're not even allowed to say communist, right? So, in May, Ukraine adopted this controversial decommunization laws, outlawing the display of Soviet symbols and prohibiting the use of the term communist. They've been taught, remember, you got guys running around with swastikas and shit on them, fine. Hammer and sickle, outlawed. Outlawed. They've been taught just by that alone. Then, okay, being a Nazi, maybe it's a little extreme. It's not ideal. But at least it's not being a communist. The hammer and sickle to them, that's like a swastika. That's worse than a swastika. Because the swastika is still allowed. It's not so bad, right? The Communist Party of Ukraine refused to change its name, logo, or charter to comply with the legislation. John Dalhousian of Amnesty International said the court ban set a dangerous precedent. The decision may be seen as dealing with the damaging vestiges of its Soviet past. What fucking damaging vestiges? In 2009, the majority of Ukrainians approved of communism, the Soviet Union, who were old enough to have lived through it, certainly. What damaging vestiges? And just to show you guys this, so you know I'm not kookballs banana. This is the percent of people, this is 2009 Pew. Percent of people who approve of the change to democracy, right, from communism. Ukraine, 2009, 30% approved. 70% of people in Ukraine, 6 years before this law is getting passed, outlawing being a communist, 70% did not approve of capitalism or the change to it, right? So what are the fucking so-called damaging vestiges? Do the people of Ukraine know that there are damaging vestiges of Soviet past there? Because I don't fucking think they do. What approval of the change to capitalism, that was democracy as a verb, this one is capitalism. Ukraine, 63% do not approve of it. The majority do not approve of it. What damaging vestiges? They don't like capitalism. 63% do not like capitalism, right? Age gap, and change to democracy and capitalism. The majority of communists in Ukraine are older. So over the age of 65, they had 20 years to live as adults under communism and 20 years to live as adults under capitalism. Ukraine, only 20% of people over the age of 65 approve of the change to a multi-party system. And actually, even 18 to 29, only 34% do. Most of them do not like a multi-party system. A market economy, the numbers are bleak as well. Only 20% of people old enough to have lived through it approve of a multi-party system and similarly of a market economy. They don't like this shit. So for The Guardian to come in and say, interviewing this guy from Amnesty International saying it was dealing with the damaging vestiges of the Soviet past, you made that up. You are making that up. You are writing it so it is so. But it was not so. Nobody thought there were damaging vestiges of the Soviet past running around in Ukraine 6 years before this all happened, right? And I think that's really important to know. We invented that Ukrainians hate communism. And we've repeated it so much and made them pass so many laws outlining being able to talk positively about communism that now your average Ukrainian under the age of 35 thinks that Ukraine always hated communism. They did not. They approved of it more than like every other country, actually, right? It's absolutely crazy to watch happen. People worse off than under communism. 62% of people in 2009 said they were worse off than under communism. Right? What fucking damaging vestiges of the Soviet past? Only 12% of Ukrainians said that their life was better than it was under the Soviet past. Crazy. Crazy to me. We could just do that. We just invented that Ukraine hated communism out of thin air in 2013, 2014, and now everyone just assumes it's real. It's absolutely kookballs, alternate universe we're living in. So in fact, he says, it does exactly the opposite by following the same style of draconian measures used to stifle dissent. It also did not happen, whatever. So on September 16th, also, Ukrainian authorities published a list of people banned from entering the country, including dozens of journalists, mostly from Russia. And imagine, again, that Russia did this. That would be all over the news. We'd think that was so evil. The government in Kiev is fighting separatist insurgents supported by Russia in eastern Ukraine. Nobody is saying that these are Ukrainians. Nobody is saying there is a civil war in Ukraine, which is the truth. Because many people are unhappy that their government is trying to force them into capitalism, which they do not want and do not like, or force them out of being able to support communism. Here's the ban article on Soviet symbols and criminalizing sympathy for communism, even. New laws honor controversialist nationalist groups that committed ethnic cleansing or allied with Nazis for the second part of the war. Let me make sure I don't have this in a second part here. Do I? That's the next one. So this is the next one. Yes. Okay, great. 2 new laws that ban communist symbols, this is in 2015, while honoring nationalist groups that collaborated with the Nazis, have come into effect in Ukraine, raising concerns that Kiev could be stifling free speech and further fragmenting the war-torn country in the rush to break ties with its Soviet past. The first law on the condemnation of the communist and Nazi totalitarian regimes forbids both Soviet and Nazi symbols, making something as trivial as selling a USSR souvenir or singing the Soviet national hymn or the International punishable by up to 5 years in prison for an individual and up to 10 years in prison for members of an organization. Now remember again, Nazis running around with Nazi symbols all over the place while this is happening. People are running around sanctioned by the Ukrainian army, right? Running around with wolf sangle patches on things and even the swastikas. So we see that was not actually enforced for the Nazi part of it. It also makes it a criminal offense to deny the criminal character of the communist totalitarian regime of 1917 to 1991 in Ukraine. Just again, it is illegal to say that communism was not criminal in Ukraine. Meanwhile, 62% of people in Ukraine think communism was better than capitalism. And they make it illegal for you to say that. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say that you liked communism now. It's illegal, starting in 2015. So again, imagine you're 22 years old, okay, This law was passed in 2015. It's been 7 years. You were a little kid when this happened. So you've only lived in a Ukraine where it is illegal to say good things about communism. And then what happens? You see Westerners say, no, communism did a lot of good things in your country, actually. And they're like, oh, what? Like, they're so propagandist. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, no, it did criminal, awful things in my country. No, babes, you've been heavily fucking propagandized out of learning the truth. Go ask Base Babusha Granny. She's not allowed to fucking tell you because it's illegal now. The second law recognizes controversial nationalist groups, including the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, and Ukrainian Insurgent Army, UPA, as independence fighters. These are people that worked with the Nazis to slaughter ethnic minorities during the Holocaust, and makes it a criminal offense to question the legitimacy of their actions. You are not allowed to say, why did the OUN and the UPA slaughter ethnic minorities in conjunction with Hitler and the Nazis in Ukraine? You can say that. It's illegal to say. So this is why when you talk to somebody who's like, I'm Ukrainian, ask them, was Stepan Bandera a Nazi? Yes or no? And that's how you know how cooked they are, how fucking propagandized they are. This is absolutely crazy that they did this to their people. They propagandized their people so hard. And I say that as American. We propagandize our people very, very hard. So I see it. I understand it. It's not their fault. While these two groups at different times fought both Soviet and German forces, they also collaborated with the Nazis and took part in ethnic cleansing. One of the authors of the law is the son of UPA leader Roman Shukevyuk. Supporters of the law say they're a way to build national identity and condemn totalitarianism, but the legislation has been roundly condemned by academics and human rights organizations as well as Ukrainian activists. While other Eastern European countries have also banned communist symbols, Ukraine's law is more wide-reaching than previous measures. The laws could also have a divisive impact on a fragmented country in which many citizens, especially in the southern and eastern regions, are in favor of close ties with Russia rather than Kiev's pro-Western policies and sympathize with the Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. They are the Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine. They are citizens. Long a hot-button issue, Ukraine's Soviet past has become especially contentious after the ousting of President Yanukovych last year and the conflict against Russian-backed separatists in two eastern regions, people who wanted to secede, which has claimed at least 6,100 lives since April 2014. And in what has become known as Lenin Fall, activists have torn down more than 100 monuments to Vladimir Lenin around the country, sometimes clashing with pro-Russian protesters. Other Ukrainians. Nazis have torn down statues honoring Lenin, and other Ukrainians have protested and tried to stop them. Two other laws taking effect on Thursday open up Soviet archives and officially replace the Soviet term Great Patriotic War with Second World War in common with Western countries. No, that's fine. In an open letter after the laws on independence fighters and communist symbols were passed by parliament, 70 scholars and experts from Ukraine around the world called on President Poroshenko not to sign them, arguing that their content contradicts the right to freedom of speech. So they're talking about how this would be bad, blah, 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 going on. The main danger of these laws is the movement of political discourse to the right and the violence of the far right against left-wing activists. It's a further stop towards the legitimization of these things. Conservatism and violence against leftists, which have been growing for the past 3 to 4 years. Now remember, we're supposed to be told in the West that all the leftists are somehow secretly right-wing, that communism's not leftism, right? This isn't true. Everybody knows this. This is an activist named Denis Pilas, who's with the Ukrainian group Left Opposition, who wrote a scathing analysis of the law in the Journal Commons. In addition, the anti-communist legislation could entail millions of dollars in expenses for renaming of huge numbers of cities, streets, and other places connected with communist figures or the Soviet Union at a time when Ukraine is in economic crisis. So, scary stuff. Scary stuff. Now, we've just read this. Next, we're going to read this article, which is from, what is this, World Socialist website. Okay. So this is Ukrainian government spends millions on monuments and streets to honor Nazi collaborators and neo-fascists. So they tear down all of this stuff referencing Lenin. They make it illegal for the majority of people there, right, to talk about their politics, say that they support communism, because it's the majority of people there supported communism at this time. They make that illegal. They tear down statues honoring Lenin. So what do they do in its place? Spoiler alert, they build a bunch of statues honoring Nazis. 80 years ago in 1943, Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, was liberated from Nazi occupation by troops of the Red Army led by General Nikolai Vatutin. Shortly after the liberation of Kiev, General Vatutin died as a result of a wound inflicted on him on an ambush by Ukrainian Nazi collaborators from the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. In 1944, he was buried in one of the central parks of Kiev that he had liberated, and a monument was erected on his grave with the inscription, "To General Vatutin from the Ukrainian people." The general was deservedly considered a hero. Flowers from the people of Kiev always lay at his monument. And now in our days, in the year of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Kiev, the monument to Vatutin was demolished. With this demolition, the Kiev authorities also desecrated his grave. The destruction of monuments of the soldiers of Red Army, which liberated Ukraine and Europe from fascism, is going on throughout Ukraine. In some cities such as Chernivtsi, Rivne, and others, they are demolished. In some places, they are completely blown up, as happened, for example, in Nikolaev. In addition, many other monuments are being demolished. Monuments to Russian poet Alexander Pushkin, to writers Nikolai Ostrovsky and Maxim Gorky, the test pilot Valery Chkalov, and more. Moreover, in recent years, cities, villages, streets, and squares have been massively renamed in Ukraine. Since February 2014, after the coup d'etat during Euromaidan, more than 1,000 settlements and more than 50,000 streets have been renamed in Ukraine. Last year alone, 237 streets, squares, avenues, and boulevards were renamed just in Kiev, as the city's authorities, headed by Mayor Klitschko, proudly report. The same government which for 9 years since 2014, when Klitschko first became mayor after the coup, could not build in Kiev, a city of 3 million people with constant traffic jams on the roads, a single new metro station, a single new multi-level transport interchange, a single new medical center, a single new campus, a single waste processing complex, and so on. Where did such an insistent desire to rename everything and everyone come from? Is it because a large number of local residents wanted this? Because they were suddenly no longer satisfied with the names of the cities and streets where they themselves, their parents, and sometimes their grandparents were born and raised? Nothing of the sort. There were no referendums, no votes of local residents on these issues. No one was asked their opinion. On the contrary, in a few cases that polls were conducted, they almost always showed their overwhelming disagreement with the renaming. For example, in one case, the renaming of the regional center Kirovgrad a few years ago, which had been named so almost 90 years ago in honor of the famous Soviet statesman Sergei Kirov, the absolute majority of the city's population, 82%, did not support the decision to rename the city. Sorry. Oops, my charger fell out of the wall. Rename the city to Kropyvnytsky. Only 14% supported it. So I really want you to think about this in conjunction with the other statistics we've seen about how many people in Ukraine supported communism, didn't want these things to happen, right? When I say we stole that country. We forced them to hate Russia, to hate their communist past. They didn't want to. We made this happen. We manufactured this completely. We can look at a country in the United States. We can look at another country and we can say, we want you to hate communism and to hate your neighbor, and we'll make it happen. And we will. We will, because now when you ask the average Ukrainian, especially younger ones, they will tell you they hate communism and they hate Russia. And we made that happen. This is how we made that happen, right? This is not what was going on. I'm so sorry about the charger. I don't have real walls. Things fall out of my charger or my outlet sometimes. But neither nor in this case nor in any of the other cases where monuments were demolished and streets were renamed did the authorities care at all about the opinions of the citizens. The why then is all this happening? The answer to this question becomes clearer if you look closely at the new names and monuments that are now being erected. The avenue of General Vatutin, who helped liberate Kiev from Nazism, which was discussed at the very beginning of this article, was renamed to the avenue of Roman Shukevyk, a Ukrainian fascist. At the time of the attack of Nazi Germany on the Soviet Union in June 1941, Shukevyk served as a member of the Nachigol Battalion, a subdivision of the military intelligence of the Wehrmacht, which consisted of Ukrainian Nazi collaborators. What was formerly Moscow Avenue in Kiev was renamed to the Avenue of Stepan Bandera. Another Ukrainian Nazi collaborator, leader of the OUMB, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which during the Second World War became famous for its collaboration with German Nazis and its genocidal massacre of Polish and Jewish population. There are now many monuments erected and streets named in honor of Bandera and cities throughout Ukraine. Literal fucking Nazi. The Druzhny Narodov Boulevard in Kiev was renamed into the Mykola Mikhnovsky Boulevard. Mikhnovsky was one of the main ideologists of Ukrainian nationalism, the author of the chauvinistic slogan, Ukraine is for Ukrainians. And the street named after the Soviet military leader, Ukrainian Marshal Malinovsky, one of the leaders of the Red Army during the war against Nazism, was named the Street of the Heroes of the Azov Battalion, the neo-Nazis. I can't even show this picture, actually. It'll be a terms of service. They're holding up a swastika. They renamed it after the neo-Nazi battalion holding up a swastika. That is one of the streets in Kiev now. It's just named that. The Azov Battalion is a neo-fascist paramilitary formation that is now an official part of the Ukrainian army. Its emblem is the wolf's angle, a notorious Nazi emblem that has been used by units of the Nazi SS in particular. For those who did not know or forgot, let me remind you that Azov was recognized as a neo-Nazi and terrorist group even by U.S. Congress. Okay, I have to scroll past this picture because it's a terms of service violation to even show you because it's a fucking swastika. At the same time, when the march in Kiev, the 10th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine was officially renamed Edelweiss. During the Second World War, Edelweiss was the first name, or rather the name, of the 1st Mountain Infantry Division of the Nazi Wehrmacht. This division played a major role in the deportation of the Jews, the execution of prisoners of war, as well as in the punitive operations against the partisans of Yugoslavia, Italy, Czechoslovakia, and Greece. Today, skull patches, which practically do not differ from the emblems of the SS division's death's head and other Nazi units, are openly worn not only by many military personnel of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, but also by the Supreme Commander. So when we say Ukraine full of Nazis, it's not even a secret. Like, the fact that people are like, this is Russian propaganda. Your streets are named after Nazis. You're building statues honoring Nazis. It's crazy. It's crazy. Dorian Sapiens, I'm a U.S. journalist. I do not see any Nazi symbols on these brave Ukrainian freedom fighters. Exactly. So crazy. So, the current government in Ukraine, I'm doing the so a lot. I'm trying not to do the so anymore. It's like a vocal tick I've noticed to myself when I listen back to things. I need to cool it. I've been doing it a lot here. It is very blatantly Nazi, yes, as Comrade censored South. The current government of Ukraine is completely destroying everything that is somehow connected with Russia, which most of Ukraine was part of for hundreds of years, even monuments and streets that were named in honor of world-famous writers like Leo Tolstoy. It is also destroying everything that is related to the 70-year-old Soviet period in the history of Ukraine, and with socialism and leftist ideology in general. For example, streets named after Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels have been renamed. Monuments to them have been demolished. Socialist and communist symbols from the red flag to the performance of the International are prohibited. Likewise, all left-wing parties are banned in Ukraine, including the Union of Left Forces for New Socialism, which I head. Socialism and communism are banned. Left-wing activists are persecuted and imprisoned, and neo-Nazism is becoming an element of state policy and increasingly the dominant ideology. So people are like, listen to Ukrainians. Okay, I am. They're telling me shit's fucked. They're telling me shit's real fucked. It's bad. This all-out war by the Ukrainian authorities against all public symbols, monuments, and names that are associated with Russia, the October Revolution, and Soviet history or leftist ideology requires a lot of money. Mallard. The cost of just one plate with a new street name for one house, according to Kiev authorities, is at least 1,000 hryvnia, about 25 euros. This must be multiplied by the dozens and sometimes hundreds of houses on the same street. And then this must be multiplied by the tens of thousands of streets that are being renamed. Let me also remind you of more than 1,000 renamed cities and villages. But the cost of the new address plates is only a small part of the enormous cost of this right-wing campaign. There are many more components. All institutions and enterprises have to change documents, order new seals and stamps, update signs at the entrance, and so on. We need new signs for the roads, entrances to the settlements, as well as for streets and roads throughout Ukraine. Many institutions, not only in the renamed cities but throughout the country, need to be provided with new maps and atlases. For instance, the renaming only of the city Zhdanov to Mariupol costs around 24 million euros. According to the most conservative estimates, the massive wave of street renaming and demolition of monuments throughout the country has already cost more than 1 billion euros. And this is in the most impoverished country in Europe, during a war at that. This is a country which is now in critical need of financial assistance, and 60% of whose state budget revenues this year are being provided by funding from abroad, mainly from the EU and the US. This means that the money of European and American taxpayers is now being spent, among other things, on the mass renaming of streets in Ukraine in honor of Nazi collaborators and neo-Nazis. I don't think most citizens of the donor countries would agree with this, but it seems that they, like most citizens of Ukraine, are not going to be asked for their opinion. Bars. All right, and then next we have an article from The Nation from 2019 that says neo-Nazis and the far right are on the march in Ukraine. 5 years after the Maidan uprising, anti-Semitism and fascist-inflected ultranationalism are rampant. 5 years ago, Ukraine's Maidan uprising ousted President Viktor Yanukovych to the cheers and support of the West. Politicians and analysts in the United States and Europe not only celebrated the uprising as a triumph of democracy, but denied reports of the Maidan's ultranationalism, smearing those who warned about the dark side of the uprising as Moscow puppets and useful idiots. Freedom was on the march in Ukraine. Today, increasing reports of far-right violence, ultranationalism, and erosion of basic freedoms are given the lie to the West's initial euphoria. There are neo-Nazi pogroms against the Roma, rampant attacks on feminist and LGBT groups, book bans, and state-sponsored glorification of Nazi collaborators. These stories of Ukraine's dark nationalism are coming out of Moscow. They're being filed by Western media, including US-funded Radio Free Europe, Jewish organizations like the World Jewish Congress, and the Simon Wiesenthal Center, and watchdogs like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and Freedom House, which issued a joint report warning that Kiev is losing the monopoly on the use of force in the country as far-right gangs operate with impunity. 5 years after Maidan, the beacon of democracy is looking more like a torchlight march. Why do they love torches? Why do Nazis love torches? I have no fucking clue. It's weird. The DC establishment's standard defense of Kiev is to point out that Ukraine's far right has a smaller percentage of seats in the parliament than their counterparts in places like France. And that's a spurious argument. What Ukraine far right lacks in poll numbers, it makes up for with things like Marine Le Pen could only dream of. Paramilitary units and free reign on the streets. Post-Maidan Ukraine is the world's only nation to have a neo-Nazi formation in its armed forces. The Azov Battalion was initially formed out of the neo-Nazi gang Patriots of Ukraine. Andriy Beletsky, the gang's leader who became Azov's commander, once wrote that Ukraine's mission is to, we all know, say it, lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against the Semite-led Untermenschen. Beletsky is now a deputy in Ukraine's parliament. In the fall of 2014, remember this is from 2019, In the fall of 2014, Azov, which is accused of human rights abuses, including torture by Human Rights Watch and the UN, was incorporated into Ukraine's National Guard. While the group officially denies any neo-Nazi connections, Azov nature has been confirmed by multiple Western outlets. The New York Times called the battalion openly neo-Nazi. USA Today, The Daily Beast, The Telegraph, and Haaretz documented group members' proclivity for swastikas, salutes, and other Nazi symbols. Individual fighters have also acknowledged being neo-Nazis. In January 2018, Azov rolled out its National Druzhina street patrol, whose members swore personal fealty to Beletsky and pledged to restore Ukrainian order in the streets. The Druzhina quickly distinguished itself by carrying out pogroms against the Roma and LGBT organizations and storming a municipal council. Earlier this year, Kiev announced the neo-Nazi unit will be monitoring polls in next month's presidential election. In 2017, Congressman Ro Khanna led the effort to ban Azov from receiving OS arms and training, but the damage had already been done. The research group Bellingcat proved that Azov had already received access to American grenade launchers, while a Daily Beast investigation showed U.S. trainers are unable to prevent aid from reaching white supremacists. And Azov itself has proudly posted a video of the unit welcoming NATO representatives. So, we read this. I don't know if you guys remember this. We read this a couple weeks ago, and I moved it to the section, but I think it is really worth reading again to just hit home. Maurer says, the state is supposed to have a monopoly on violence. That's what a state does. But Ukraine is not. Their state is not a state. They are a liberal arm. They are the liberal arm of those who do wield violence. Exactly. I think that's worth saying. Yeah. Like, the state, it doesn't matter how official it is or isn't. Like, Azov is their state. It is their state apparatus. And they know that. And that's why Zelensky, when he visits these far-right extremist groups in their military, they're like, you don't call the shots. We call the shots. Like, and that's why they have this power standoff. Particularly concerning is Azov's campaign to transform Ukraine into a hub for transnational white supremacy. The unit has recruited neo-Nazis from Germany, the UK, Brazil, Sweden, and America. Last October, the FBI arrested 4 California white supremacists who allegedly received training from Azov, and this is a classic example of blowback. U.S. supports radicals abroad, ricocheting to hit America. Speaker of Parliament Andrei Puriboy co-founded and led 2 neo-Nazi organizations, the Social National Party of Ukraine, later renamed Svoboda, and Patriot of Ukraine, whose members would eventually form the core of Azov. So, we remember all this. God, I keep doing this so. Fuck. State-sponsored glorification of Nazi collaborators. We did read all this before, again, so we don't need to read the whole thing again, but we just need to remember they've got the anti-Semitism. They've got book bans. They've got Roma pogroms. They have LGBT and women's rights groups. They have attacks on press, language laws. And just imagine if any of this was happening in a communist place. In Cuba. In the DPRK. In Russia, even. Fuck. Not even a communist place. People would be losing their minds over this. But no, when it happens in Ukraine, it either doesn't exist, or if it does exist, it's not that big of a deal. Now, we have time, I think, to get through Crimea. So I really want to get through Crimea. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap it up on this subject? And this topic was really just the new ultra-right post-coup government in Ukraine. Just to give you a sense of, like, what's happening in Ukraine. What is up with these people? Like, what's the new government look like? Okay, they win a coup. The U.S. backs it. Then what happens? So I think we know what happens. Terror in the streets, naming everything after fucking Nazis. People who want to leave because they're being terrorized for their ethnicity, being forced to stay. Civil war breaking out. I mean, it's just hell. So what do you guys think? Do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts on this that we should address before? Yeah, imagine if it were happening communistically. People would be losing their fucking minds. And we all know the truth. This wouldn't happen under communism. This cannot happen under communism. Contrary to all of the horseshoe theory bullshit liberals like to pretend is real, there's no way this could happen under communism. It's a totally different framework. Are they good? Hegel's big dialecticals? Okay, good. I hope you guys are interested. Because I know the resource documents exist, but it's a lot. It's dense. And sometimes it's nice to just go over it. And I think it's one of those things, too, where it's like, you know, and then you really think about it, and you're like, fuck, but, now I know. Like, think about how horrifying it would be. And again, so I'm in the United States, so I think about this with our Spanish-speaking population. We have something similar. We have ICE running through the street, basically doing pogroms against people from Latin America. So I really do think of it like that. Like, imagine you're a Spanish speaker in the southern half of the United States, and this is what's going on, right? Even more terrifying than what's going on in the United States today. The West broke Ukraine as part of an encirclement strategy against Russia, or is this just typical anti-communist behavior type of empire? So we had a few things we wanted. We've been working on Ukraine for a really long time. We wanted natural gas deals there. We wanted to encircle, though, also Russia for NATO. So it was kind of a both. It was a private business thing and a military strategy. There's no way what can exist during communism. Nazis and racism. Nazis, certainly. Fascism. Fascism and communism are opposite ideologies. Fascism was actually created to be an anti-communist ideology. It was intentionally created to be the opposite of communism. And then the West likes to tell you, yeah, they're basically the same. They're all the same. So that you just stick with them and do capitalism forever as long as they can, milk cash out of you or whatever the fuck. It makes it even scarier to talk to Slava Ukraine type liberals. I know. It's and you feel crazy. You feel crazy, right? You're like, this is evil. Please fucking stop doing this immediately. Ah! And they're like, no, you're a bad person. Free Ukraine. And you're like, what the fuck? Oh, Bogo's Blinted. I don't know if you guys can see that. That was a wild one. Crazy person. I do think a little bit of talking to people, though, could be nice when they say stuff like that. Like, I think that person literally just didn't know, you know? Just like a second on it. Like, and then if they push back again, you know, to be like, okay, you're done. But sometimes people, like, literally, they've been taught to think DPRK is fascist. They don't know what fascism is. They don't know what these things mean, you know? Yeah, they don't know. Wait, in Sweden, we've given so much money to Ukraine that our current government is more in debt than ever before, and we have a new election in September hoping for our Nazi government to go, wow, that's crazy. I didn't realize that. Yeah. Very, very fascinating. Okay, let's get into what happened in Crimea. So this is the thing you're going to hear a lot. Like, then Russia stole Crimea. All of this, and then Russia shows up. Just things are going well in Ukraine, right? This is the liberal perspective. They have a revolution. Things are going super, super well. So democratic. Remember when we read that liberal woman talking about the revolution? This is the revolution she was talking about. She was so proud. Freedom, democracy. Ah, yay. That's the revolution she was doing that about. Fucking Nazis running through the street and shit. So that's the liberal perspective. They have a revolution. Everything's going great. And then for no reason, out of nowhere, Russia just shows up and is like, we're stealing Crimea. What the fuck was that about? That is literally how they talk about this. So what actually happened there? Well, not that. Spoiler alert. So let's see what really occurred. You got the Nazis running through the street. They're doing pogroms. They're not great to live next to. And Crimea is, well, look at good old Wiki. Show me 82. Okay. Is this it? Nope. Nope. What the fuck? We'll just do this. We'll just stay here. They're 68% Russian ethnically. There are people who don't even know that fucking Russian is an ethnicity in Ukraine. They're like, what the fuck is ethnically Russian? I've encountered that before. So, 68% in 2014 of Crimea was ethnically Russian. So think about this. You're ethnically Russian. You live in Crimea. Your country gets taken over by fucking Nazis. You're like, this isn't great. The Nazis are running through your streets, yelling death to Russians, death to communists. Remember that from the first one. They're lighting buildings on fire because there's Russians inside of them, killing people. 24 people killed, right? They're making it illegal to speak Russian in public spaces. Remember, you're Russian. You're like, this doesn't look good. What are you going to do? What's your move? Right? Well, your move is move? Leave? Well, Russia was like, hey, we'll make it easy for you guys to get passports if you want to come move here. And the Ukrainian government is like, fuck you, no. And you're like, okay, so I guess I can't move to Russia. A lot of people did move to Russia. The guy who came and repaired my washing machine that I was talking about this, he was Ukrainian. He just moved to Russia when this was all happening. He was like, fuck this, I'm out. And he moved to Moscow. So what do? And all of your neighbors are like, yeah, we are not happy about this. Why not try to secede? Why not? Why not try to be like, you know what? We just won't be Ukraine anymore. We see what you guys got going on. That's fine. We want out. Get us out of here. Yeah. And that's exactly what happens, right? So this is very rational. This is very, very rational. So they hold a referendum and they ask, in your view, what should the status of certain territories of Donbass that are not controlled by the authorities of Ukraine? Oh, this is the Donbass one. Wait. Sorry. Find me Crimea. Here we go. And what they say is Putin is seizing Crimea, blah, 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 blah. You know, they're doing the whole thing. But a third of the Donbass region, according to... Oh, this is Donbass. Wrong one. Oh, Crimea. Sorry, I started wrong. It was all Donbass. We're going to do Crimea. Sorry. Here you go. So, they hold a referendum. And they're like, we want to get out of here. But before they get to that point, tensions in Crimea are huge. They're massive. They're mounting, right? So Russia puts military on high alert as Crimea protests leave one man dead. And this is in February 2014. This is like a month into the new coup government, maybe a couple weeks. Putin ordered an urgent drill of his country's armed forces in western Russia and what appeared to be a display of saber rattling aimed at the new government of Kiev. What's he actually doing? He's saying, do not fuck with us. You guys have some crazy shit going on? Do not fuck with us. Like, do not come for us. Do not fuck with us. We know you want to join NATO, the anti-Russian Super Friends Alliance. We know you just had a neo-Nazi revolution. We know you're over there naming all your streets, tearing down statues of Russians and renaming them all to fucking psychotic Nazis. Do not come for us. We have a military. And also, it's like, in case they come for us, we are militaristically prepared, right? This is what this looks like. The amount of times Russia warned Ukraine, and yeah, exactly. The U.S. reacted in a strongly worded message, with the Secretary of State John Kerry saying that any military intervention in Ukraine would be a grave mistake. For a country that has spoken out so frequently against foreign intervention in Libya and Syria and elsewhere, it would be important for them to heed those warnings as they think about options in the sovereign nation of Ukraine, Kerry warned last night. And this is again from February 26th of 2014. Putin had earlier instructed his defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, to place Russia's military in a state of high alert for drills in the western military district bordering Ukraine. The defense ministry denied the drills had anything to do with the political situation in Kiev, where the government of President Viktor Yanukovych was in effect toppled at the weekend. Oh, so this was so fast. This was like the same week. But the move comes amid increasingly forthright statements from Moscow that the rights of ethnic Russians in Ukraine are being infringed. They were. Shoigu told the defense ministry meeting that forces must be ready to bomb unfamiliar testing grounds as part of the drill. In his blunt message, Kerry also announced the Obama administration was planning $1 billion in loan guarantees and additional funding for Ukraine. But he said his U.S. policy towards Ukraine was not aimed at reducing Russia's influence. We explicitly said it was aimed at reducing Russia's influence. This is not Rocky IV, Kerry said. It's not a zero-sum game. We do not view it through the lens of East-West, Russia-US, or anything else. Yes, we do, and later we would just admit that. We view it as an example of people with a sovereign nation who are expressing their desire to choose their future, and that's a very powerful force. But remember, we also invested a ton of money via Ned into switching public opinion around. So we know this is not true, and we did this on purpose. Crimea also has a largely pro-Russian population, and earlier this week, Ukraine's acting president, Turchinov, warned that there was a serious risk of separatism in the region. So they knew this would happen. This is not surprising to anybody. In the regional capital of Simferopol on Wednesday, there was a gathering of around 10,000 Crimean Tatars. I always say Tatar. What is it actually? It can't be tater. They're not tater tots. They are not tater tots. What are they? Oh, I missed some hydrates. Tatar. How do you pronounce it, anyone? Tater. Is it tater? Are they taters? Tatar. Tartar sauce. Fuck. Tatar. Yeah. Okay. A Muslim ethnic group that supported the peninsula remaining part of Ukraine. Waving Ukrainian flags, they chanted, "Ukraine is not Russia." Tartar. The group clashed with a smaller pro-Russian rally nearby in which participants waved Russian flags. Protesters shouted abuse at each other, and the atmosphere growing more hostile by the afternoon. The pro-Russian group swelled to around 5,000 later on as more protesters arrived on buses from the port city of Sevastopol, where the Russian Black Sea Fleet is based. A smattering of rocks flew as the two sides engaged in fistfights at the front line. The anger in the faces of both sides was visible shortly before the violence as they catcalled and jeered one another and beckoned at each other, offering the occasional middle finger salute. "You're defending all the millionaires who've stolen the land," shouted one angry Tatar. The Russians responded with a taunting rally cry of "Burka, Burka, Burka," a reference to the police special unit responsible for much of the violence against protesters in Kiev last week that left at least 82 dead. Alu Akbar chanted the Tatars, as the other side responded with a rallying cry of "Russia, Russia, Russia." Those in the Tatar camp hold signs reading "Ukraine to Europe. We just want to be free," said Arsen Bilyov, a 36-year-old Tatar. You want to be free, you want to become Europe. What are you talking about? You're talking about giving away land. You're saying give Ukraine to Europe. The clashes resulted in several serious injuries on the Russian side, as well as one death, apparently from a heart attack. The parliamentary session was canceled as a result of the violence outside. So I just want to think about how passive this is. The clashes resulted in several serious injuries on the Russian side. So the pro-Europe side violently attacked them and seriously injured them, is what happened. Ukraine's acting interior minister said he was doing all he could so as not to inflame tensions in Crimea further. The police and all enforcement bodies in Crimea received instruction from me at any cost do not provoke any conflict, any military confrontation with the civilians, Avakov said. I'm demanding law enforcement officers from Sevastopol to Simferopol to do all possible to prevent clashes between radical pro-Russian forces, just the normal people living there, with any other radicals, including those who stand for European integration or Crimean Tatars. Avakov also announced on Wednesday the notorious Berkut riot police, elite troops responsible for much of the violence over the past 3 months, had been disbanded. The special unit has totally discredited itself, he said, adding that a new unit would be established in time. The 4,000 former Berkut troops will now have to pass a validation exam within the next 15 days to determine whether they will serve in the new structure. He added that some top-ranking Berkut officers have fled already and police were searching for them. What is it? Tatar. Fuck. I'm gonna figure it out. However, in another side that Crimea is the only part of Ukraine where the new authorities are not welcome. It's not. Spoiler alert, it's not. A number of Berkut units remaining in the region from Kiev have received a hero's welcome this week, and on Wednesday, the newly appointed pro-Russian mayor of Sevastopol invited the elite squad to join local law enforcement. Since Yanukovych fled the capital at the weekend, the protest movement has moved to take over the mantle of government, attempting to build bridges with the police and intelligence services, continuing to patrol the capital with its own self-defense unit. So from the jump, there were people who were like, we are not happy with this coup that's going on. So this is like really, really, really fresh, right? This is like the week of. And all of the people are like, oh no, we do not want these Nazis to be in charge of our fucking government. And that's what really starts this whole situation going on in Crimea. Presidential elections have not even happened yet. They were set for May 25th after the coup. Timoshenko, they're talking about Braid Lady. They're like, maybe she'll run, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So Ukrainian police were still searching for Yanukovych. He fled to Moscow for safekeeping. That's where he went. They said at first that he was not there. Oh, maybe they just helped him escape. I think maybe they just helped him escape, yeah. And then he ended up later showing up in Russia. But they did help him escape. Now, what happens next? So we have video footage that's going to include Crimea. Let me get it ready. Hold on. It's intense. We're going to find... Is this all Crimea? Sorry, hold please. I feel like we watched a little bit of this. So maybe we watched this track.
Hey, what? Down the left way. What's up?
Февраль 2014-го. Столица Украины, Киев. Гражданское противостояние в городе достигает максимального накала. Десятки тысяч противников президента Януковича яростно митингуют на Майдане.
Приоткрывайте, смотрите, что творится с теми первыми автобусами. Вот. Мы увидели, что первый автобус открыли сзади моторное отделение и начали закидывать коктейлями. Автобус загорелся.
Они говорили, что мы ждем вас на этом блокпосту в Корсуне-Шевченковском. Ждем уже 3-й день. И вот, наконец-то дождались. Издевались как могли. Наш автобус начал разворачиваться, застрял в кювете. Вот. На обочине стояла машина. С машины вышел мужчина с ружьем и начал палить в автобус, чтобы, прекратить движение. И вот он стрельнул сначала.
These protesters have come here to call for a referendum. They've been shouting pro-Russia slogans.
This is it. So this is where we're talking about Crimea.
Одним із найперших завдань новоствореного військового штабу є розробка конкретних планів по обороні населених пунктів та територій, котрі найближчим часом можуть стати ареною імперіалістичних посягань Кремля. Надважливим завданням для бійців правого сектору сьогодні є боротьба з кремлівською п'ятою колоною, недопущення її широкомасштабної діяльності, знешкодження її найактивніших представників, припинення діяльності антиукраїнських ЗМІ тощо. Наказую створити військові штаби правого сектору в усіх без виключення областях нашого держави. Закликаю представників армії, обласних очільників СБУ та МВС докласти максимум зусиль для координації дій з обласними підрозділами правого сектору, озброєнню та вишколи цих підрозділів. Хочу нагадати, що правий сектор – це осередок чіткої ієрархії, порядку і дисципліни. У нас немає місця для отаманщини і деструктивної анархістської діяльності. Тільки так перемога.
That shows that the interim authorities in Kiev are still in control here, but this population, with its Russian flag over there attached to the Ukrainian flag, wants to have a closer alliance with Russia. It wants a referendum in order to make its own decisions about the future.
Delivering a speech in Kharkiv, Ukrainian presidential candidate Vitaly Klitschko is pelted with eggs. Using his ducking skills born through boxing to evade the smelly missiles, he points out where they're coming from. They're from pro-Russian protesters at the rally, in the minority as it was filled with many Ukrainian flags and no-war banners. Klitschko continued, but with an aerial defence, and said that Ukraine must not be split apart amid all the bloodshed. However, a decision on that is within days, at least by voters in the disputed Crimea region. A referendum is being held on March the 16th, billed as a chance for people to decide their future fairly and freely. One of the questions asks, should the 1992 constitution be restored, but would still allow Crimea to become independent and determine its own path? There is no room on the ballot paper for voting no to control by Russia or the status quo within Ukraine. Many say a return to Russian control is just a matter of time, although diplomatic efforts behind the scenes are ongoing to try to prevent that.
It is a pleasure to welcome Prime Minister Yatsenyuk to the Oval Office, to the White House.
Now remember,
I think all of us have seen.
Now remember in the Nuland phone call when she was like, Yats is the guy. It's got to be Yats. This is the guy who became the prime minister after she said that. That's Yats.
You know, the desire that I believe is universal for people to be able to determine their own destiny. And we saw in the Maidan how ordinary people from all parts of the country had said that we want to change. And you know, the Prime Minister was part of that process, showed tremendous courage, and upheld the principles of nonviolence throughout the course of events over the last several months.
Mr. President, it's all about the freedom. We fight for our freedom, we fight for our independence.
Just heard from a senior politician here in Kiev that the new government does intend to sign the association agreement with the EU, which, as you may remember, is how
сказал Шевченко, Европа, Болгария, Литва, там оттуда повыезжали, Прибалтика, людей там не осталось, там Румыния, никто туда не хочет, нас они тянут туда. Анна Ивановна, хуторная, Луганска, конечно, я пенсионерка, проработала, заработала 2 первых категории, у меня пенсия 1170, а я бешеные деньги заработала.
So, okay, so this video footage contains a lot. I definitely recommend you guys watch the videos. But you can see, there were people who were like, no, we don't want this. We don't fucking want this, right? Now, a Crimean separatist movement forms pretty quickly. Conflict fears rise after pro-Russian gunmen seize Crimean parliament. And this is February 28th. This is 2 days after the last story. Fears of a major regional conflict in Crimea pitting Russia against the West intensified on Thursday after pro-Russian gunmen. You just saw that lady. She was in a different region. She was in Luhansk, but there's people like that in Crimea. You saw there were 5,000 people in Crimea protesting in the last article that they didn't like this new government. They didn't want to be part of it. And now a couple days later, they're saying pro-Russia gunmen. They're just Crimeans. They're just Crimeans of ethnic Russian descent who don't want their country being taken over by Nazis. They seized the regional government and parliament building in a well-coordinated military operation, while similar groups were on Friday morning controlling access to the airports of Simferopol and Sevastopol. Early on Friday morning, about 50 armed gunmen reportedly marched into Simferopol's airport after arriving in Kamaz trucks. They first cordoned off the domestic terminal and then moved on to other areas. Russia Today described them as similarly dressed and equipped to the local ethnic Russian self-defense squads that seized the parliament and government buildings. Witnesses said the men at airports were bearing Russian Navy flags. The AFP news agency said the airport was operating on Fridays. This isn't that weird, though. Russia rented a port in Crimea. They leased a port in Crimea already. So there would be Russian military people just in Crimea on the day-to-day. The AP says dozens of the armed men continue to patrol the airport, and they refuse to speak to the media. AFP said representatives from the new leadership in Kiev had been due to arrive at the airport on Friday. In Sevastopol, armed men were reported to have set up a perimeter around the city's combined military-civilian airport known as Belbek on Friday morning. The Interfax news agency described them as Russian servicemen who said they'd gone to Belbek to stop fighters flying in. So that's probably true. They were probably really concerned about their port there and their property there as well. On Thursday morning in Simferopol, men dressed in fatigues stormed Crimea's administration, hoisting a Russian flag above the parliament building. About 120 men were holed up inside, armed with heavy weapons including rocket-propelled grenades and sniper rifles. With gunmen controlling the building, Crimea's parliament voted to hold a referendum on the region's status on May 25th, the same day Ukraine goes to the polls in presidential elections. It also voted to sack the region's cabinet. The move puts the predominantly ethnic Russian region on a collision course with Kiev's interim government and will fuel concern Ukraine is sliding inexorably towards breakup. It was unclear whether the gunmen were undercover Russian soldiers or members of a pro-Russian self-defense militia formed in response to Ukraine's revolution, which included radical nationalist groups. So just to say, Crimea had to form self-defense militias to protect them from the people who did the coup, from the white nationalists, from the Nazis. They had to build self-defensive militias in Crimea to protect them from the kind of violence that was going on during this coup. So it doesn't really matter to me if they were undercover Russian soldiers. Russian soldiers did rent the port there in Crimea. Or pro-Russian self-defense militias. Who fucking cares? The people of Crimea did not want to be in Ukraine anymore. It doesn't matter if Russia helped them or not. I don't really care. If we just watched a video of Obama being like, self-determination. Okay, well, what about for the fucking people of Crimea? The former head of the Crimean parliament, Serhiy Kunitsin, described the men as professionally trained and armed with enough weaponry to defend the complex for a month. Late on Thursday, the U.S. Vice President Joe Biden spoke with Ukraine's interim Prime Minister Yatsenyuk. Yats is the guy. Newland. Biden promised Ukraine's new leadership the full support of the U.S., a White House statement said. Russia's ousted ally Yanukovych, the former Ukraine president, who fled Kiev last week after his troops shot dead more than 80 people, resurfaced on Thursday to insist he was still the country's legitimate leader, excoriating Ukraine's new leadership as he did so. The government confirmed 39-year-old former opposition leader Yatsenyuk as acting prime minister and gave two of the former regime's most prominent victims places in the new administration. Tatiana Chornovol, an investigative journalist beaten up by thugs, heads a new anti-corruption office, and activist Dmytro Bulatov, who was kidnapped and had part of his ear cut off, became Ukraine's youth minister. Ukraine's acting president Chernyakhov, who's been in the job since Yanukovych fled the country, warned Russia not to intervene in the crisis by moving troops. The Kremlin's Black Sea Fleet is based near Simferopol in the port of Sevastopol. Turkhinov said, I'm appealing the military leadership of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Any military movements, the more so if they are with weapons beyond the boundaries of this territory, the base will be seen as a military aggression. Ukraine's foreign ministry also summoned Russia's acting envoy in Kiev for consultations. The White House said it was closely watching, etc., etc. Angela Merkel was particularly concerned. NATO is mad, whatever. Poland's prime minister is like, stop this, blah, 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 blah. Yanukovych then revealed he was in Russia and sought protection from Putin. So we do know he ended up there later. All right, so that's what's going on. Basically, all you need to know from this is a separatist movement starts forming pretty immediately in Crimea. They're like, fuck this. We're done. They take control of parliament. And this is another story explaining the same thing about how they take control of parliament, okay? So, then the Crimean parliament declares Crimea a part of Russia. This happens a few days later, like a week later, on March 6th. The de facto authorities in Crimea have announced that they consider the territory to be a part of Russia after a swift vote in the local parliament. The MPs said on Thursday morning that a referendum planned for March 30th, which was due to ask voters if they wanted more autonomy from Kiev, would now take place on March 16th, ask whether they wanted to join Russia, and only be a ratification of a decision that had already been taken. The parliament also appealed to Moscow to assist in its decision to seek union with Russia. The bombshell announcement coincided with an emergency EU summit in Brussels devoted to Ukraine. Senior EU officials denounced the idea as completely illegal, while British officials said they would take their cue from the interim Ukrainian government, which deems the referendum anti-constitutional. The acting Ukrainian Prime Minister, Yatsenyuk, roundly dismissed the referendum idea. So what's happening here? The local government of Crimea is like, a separatist movement forms. Armed self-defense squads are like, we're protecting this area from incoming new Ukrainian interim government, the neo-Nazi groups that are supposed to come here on Friday. We're securing the airports. We're securing our parliament. We need to vote on this immediately. The members of the parliament of the area are like, we want to be a part of Russia. We are going to hold a formal referendum for all the people to vote in. And basically, the government operating in Kiev is like, no. They're like, no, you can't leave. You can't become a part of Russia. You must stay. Yeah, you can choose whatever you want as long as you choose what we want, says Montego. Exactly. Okay, bye, Proper Chopper. So in Moscow, Russian MP Sergei Mironov said the Duma, Russia's parliament, could consider the appeal from Crimea as early as next week. So Russia they have to hear this now. It's a request from Crimea, and they have to hear it in the Russian parliament. So Crimea's like, let us in. And Russia's like, okay, we'll talk about it. Let me see what we can figure out. Right? So the Duma began to work on a bill that would make it easier for new territories to join Russia, clearly penned with one eye on the events in Crimea. Now, I want you to think back, if you've been listening to this, think back to when Russia was trying to negotiate with NATO about Ukraine. What did they say? Remember, they were like, you don't understand the political situation in Ukraine. There are a lot of people there who are ethnically Russian. If you do this, if you try to pursue this whole NATO, like Ukraine is a member of the EU thing, a lot of people there are going to disagree. And when they disagree, what are they going to do? They're going to come to Russia for help. Why? Because they're ethnically Russian, because we've had a good relationship for many years, and because we are Russian. And you're going to force us to get in the middle of this. And we don't want to get in the middle of this with you. But we're going to have to. We're going to have to defend those people if this happens. So we're begging you, just don't. Just don't do this to us. To all of us. To Ukraine, to Russia, to all of us. And you remember, Putin said that. He told the United States point blank, he was like, you don't understand how this will go. I do. This is how it will go. And now look, it's exactly what's happening. So the second this coup happens, Russia looks and they're like, all the Russians in Ukraine are going to want to join Russia now. So they passed emergency legislation being like, okay, fine, we're making it easier for you to just join Russia, I guess. And that's exactly what happened. Russia is being very, very diplomatic. Yep, exactly. Just as Virgo said. So they're like, okay, we're going to hear this case, soon. On Tuesday, the Russian President Putin had said categorically that Russia was not considering joining Crimea to Russia. And what changed? Crimea asked. So this isn't something Russia pursued. This is something that Crimea asked. At a press conference in the Crimean capital, Simferopol, the deputy prime minister of the region, Rustam Temirgaliyev, said the parliament voted by 78 votes to 0 with 8 abstentions to hold the referendum on March 16th. He said the decision, which also gave the go-ahead to the territory to begin preparations to join Russia, comes into effect from the current moment. The referendum would be held only to confirm the decision. Temirgaliyev said that as of Thursday, the only legal troops on Crimean soil were the Russian army. Any troops of a third country, will be treated as illegal banned formations with all the consequences that entails. So he's like, hey, we voted 78 to 0. So wait, there's 86 people total in the parliament. 78 of them voted like, yeah, we're going to be a part of Russia now. And they said immediately, this new neo-Nazi freak show you've got going on over there in Ukraine, get your military out of our borders immediately. We don't want it here. Remember, they'd already had to form self-defense units of random people to fight these people off. And who are the Ukrainian military units? They're the fucking neo-Nazis, like Azov Battalion and shit. Right? They're like, get your fucking Nazi freaks out of our borders now. Only Russian troops and our troops are allowed to be here. So that's what comes down. And you know what? I'd do the same. I'd do the same in a heartbeat. I'd be like, get these fucking people out of my neighborhoods, off of my streets. They're insane. They're psychopaths. Shortly after this decision was announced, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe confirmed that an observer mission of more than 30 dispatched to defuse the situation in the peninsula had been prevented from entering Crimean territory. Yep, they're like, get Europe out of here, get everybody out of here. Stretch. Ukraine has a number of military bases in Crimea that have come under siege from local armed volunteers and the Russian army in recent days. Russia has denied its troops are involved in the region despite widespread evidence to the contrary. I mean, their troops are there because they have the fucking port that they're already leasing, so whatever. Ukrainian soldiers in the bases have come under pressure to defect to Russian or Crimean forces, but mainly have not done so. And look, they say it, to Crimean forces. Why? Because Crimea is not a part of Ukraine at this moment. They're like, we're not Ukraine. With events moving quickly on the ground, the big question is whether the officer class starts to defect en masse and whether Russia uses force if they do not. In Kiev, Ukraine's economy minister Pavlo Sheremeta said the referendum would be illegitimate, but in Simferopol, politicians said the referendum was now only a formality. Crimea has a large pro-Russian population, though many want more autonomy rather than actual union with Russia. But the thing about Crimea is they had never wanted historically to join Russia. This wasn't a thing they wanted. This literally was created by the conditions of their country being taken over by weird Nazi freaks. Like, that's it. That's why they wanted to join. This was not a burning desire they had. Many of them probably would have preferred just to become a Crimean country, but they couldn't defend themselves against Ukraine on their own. They needed Russia, and Russia knew they would need them, and that's why they're like, this is exactly what will happen. And it did. Exactly as they said. The Kremlin's final goal in Crimea has been murky, with many analysts suggesting that Putin would be satisfied with more autonomy or de facto independence for the region. But Thursday's events appear to suggest that the decision has been taken to annex the region. I don't think this is the thing. They're always guessing that Putin wants to steal land, but any actual intelligence is Putin's just like, I don't want war with the West. Could you make us not go to war with you, please? Could you be chill? Whatever's going to make this shit chill, but I will defend Russian people, no matter what country they're in. So Chermaglev said, we have a group of Russian specialists here working on introducing the Russian ruble to the region. He added all Ukrainian state property in the region would be nationalized. Cool. Outside the parliament building in Simferopol, a group of about 100 people waved Russian flags and chanted as the Russian national anthem was played, as well as a new Crimean anthem that begins, "The island of Crimea is fighting for freedom," and continues with scornful words about fascist bands in Kiev and their Western backers. True! Fucking bars! The proceedings were interrupted by two topless demonstrators from the protest group Femen, who charged the stage with "Stop Putin's War" written on their torsos. They were beaten and screamed at by a crowd of elderly women before being dragged off by Cossack irregulars and taken away to a police van. Those old women were like, get the fuck out of here. This is some Pussy Riot shit. This is like some Pussy Riot stuff for sure to me. Okay. So, what happens next? Well, as you could have guessed, the Crimean people vote to secede from Ukraine, right? It is a Pussy Riot type beat, right? They're like, stop Putin's war. And all these old ladies are like, shut the fuck up and get out of here, you psychos. And that's, again, like, the stereotype in the West, the communists are just all young ding-dongs or something like that, is not backed up by evidence. It's older people who remember communism, who remember life before all these propaganda campaigns, all this disinformation, all of these fascist takeovers. So what happens? These are pro-Russian supporters celebrate in Crimea. Crimeans have voted by a huge margin to secede from Ukraine. According to early reports released after 50% of the ballots had been counted, more than 95% of voters were in favor of joining Russia. EU foreign ministers will meet to consider a parcel of sanctions against Russia, said to include visa bans and freezing the assets of a number of Russian officials. Why? Who fucking knows? The people, 95% of the votes were in favor of joining Russia. And everybody's just kind of losing their mind about it. Right? So that's how the referendum goes. It's a good article. You can read all about it. Now, Russia agrees, or attempts rather, to negotiate a settlement with Ukraine over this issue. So we're going to take a look at that. I need to do a bathroom break. I know we're really close to the end, but I don't think I can make it through. So give me 5 and I'll be right back. I just encountered some new liberal Trump derangement syndrome. I checked while I was using the bathroom, my phone, my recent post. Do you guys know that liberals think that Donald Trump is insanely pro-Russia? Did you guys know that? It's psycho. It's crazy. I like posted a video being like, why the fuck do you think this? This is crazy. And it's just liberals losing their minds. Why do they think this? Have you guys ever seen evidence of this? Like, what? Why? Where is this evidence coming from? What the fuck? This is crazy. This is, I'm like, sorry, I'm like fighting with them now. Like, does anybody know? They're crazy. Why do they think this? But like, is there evidence? Do they have evidence of this? They think that, that Trump loves Russia? 10 hydrates, 2 posture checks, and 1 shirt. No, I don't have time for any of that. This is insane. That's crazy. This is crazy. I knew they were insane. I didn't realize they were this delusional. I mean, it's like conspiratorial. It's QAnon. It's crazy. That's crazy. Like, we're literally arming Ukraine, these people. Agent Krasnov. This is crazy. They're like insane people. I didn't realize they're like, they really are blue and on. Links between Trump association with Russian officials. Fact check, which recruited by the KGB? It's a Facebook post? They really are Gen Z Facebook. They got this from Facebook? What the fuck? They're conspiracy theorists. The Russia conspiracy. This is insane. Yes. Yes, Russiagate. I remember Russiagate. I think they just wanted us to have a civil war. They do think Kamala won. They can't fathom the fact that that's how deeply unpopular they are. Crazy. This is insane. Okay, sorry. I'm like so surprised by this. This is insane. I literally posted a video with he's giving weapons to Ukraine. Like, what? Like, there's like a recent... I'm looking at... Yeah, they think Kamala won. That's the other thing. Yeah, they really think Kamala won. Let me look this up really fast. This is like... crazy. This is literally from 9 hours ago. Let's see. here. This one's a good one. Like, they really, like, the idea that Trump isn't arming Ukraine is fucking insane. Announcements and military aid. Announcements and deliveries. Okay, blah, 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 blah. U.S. military aid to Ukraine. Timeline of Trump's Ukraine aid policy. This is up to July 14th, I think, of last year. Trump agrees to a NATO proposal whereby NATO will purchase U.S. equipment and send it to Ukraine. Trump also gives Russia a 50-day deadline to reach a peace deal with Ukraine. Trump resumes the flow of aid in response to Russia's ceasefire negotiation issues. Like, what? We started resuming aid there in July 7th of last year. This is crazy. Why do they think this? This is insane. They're crazy. They're conspiracy theorists. They're gone. Like, they're so far gone. This is crazy. Okay, so whatever. All right, let's get back into this. U.S. hides Russian proposal to end crisis in Crimea. This comes from Workers' World. So the voters in Crimea on March 16th overwhelmingly voted to separate from Ukraine. The leaders of Crimea then signed a treaty to join the Russian Federation. Meanwhile, the Western imperialists have tried to bury a Russian proposal to solve the crisis, which was presented to the U.S. and the EU before a meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in London on March 14th. In addition, fascist forces are mobilizing to try to beef up the dwindling authority of the Kiev puppet government in major cities in Ukraine's east and south. The overwhelming majority of the electorate in Crimea has voted to separate from the reactionary right-wing regime in Ukraine. By most accounts, 83% of those eligible turned out to vote, with well over 90% voting to separate and spurning the choice to remain in Ukraine with autonomy. So they had the option, remain in Ukraine as an autonomous region or separate and join Russia. 83% voter turnout. Over 90% said they wanted to join Russia. Why? It's not rocket science. They didn't feel that they could protect themselves. They thought Russia could better protect them. The expansionist aggressors in Washington and their European partners declared the popular referendum illegal and put sanctions on Russia, Crimean, and Ukrainian officials. Washington's hypocrisy is shown by its dismissal of the Crimean masses popular vote. Obviously, we're reading a left-wing source, blah, blah, blah. The big business media have depicted the referendum as Russians versus Ukrainians, but people of Russian ancestry are just 58% of the population of Crimea, which has 1.5 million eligible voters. Somewhere around 500,000 Ukrainians in Crimea voted for separation as well. Right? It's important to note when assessing the referendum that Crimea has a long history of association with Russia. It was not politically part of Ukraine until it was transferred to the Ukrainian Socialist Republic in 1954 by Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. Its historical, economic, and cultural development is different than the rest of Ukraine. It is also separated geographically as a peninsula and has been home to the Russian Black Sea Fleet for over 2 centuries. So, of course, they're like, yeah, we'll just go back. It's only been like 70 years. We'll just go back. 60 years. So they have this referendum. Let me see what this says. Russia planned to end the crisis buried. Washington and Brussels have completely ignored a Russian proposal for solving the crisis. And this is the thing that really upsets you and makes you very sympathetic to Russia, even knowing they're not a Marxist-Leninist country. They tried so fucking hard to negotiate. And we were just like, fuck you every step of the way out here in the West. Right? The major points covered in the English language press, because they were announced in the Russian press, include to recognize the referendum in Crimea as legal and legitimate and to allow the people of Crimea to determine their own destiny, to legalize Russian as an official second language, to call a national conference to redraw the Ukrainian constitution and create a federal structure that would give recognition to the needs of various regions and allow for autonomy in the social, economic, and cultural spheres and foreign trade, for the EU, US, Russia, and UN to agree to geopolitical and military neutrality on Ukraine, and to confiscate all illegal arms and ban Nazi and other fascist propaganda. That's all they asked. They were like, we don't need to take in Crimea. Make Crimea autonomous. If they want to be their own country, let them be their own country. Protect Russian as a second language. Make them stop doing Nazi shit. And protect ethnic minorities in your borders, and we'll be fine. And what had happened? None of this. None of this happened, right? Alright, so we'll finish up this section, and then we'll be done. We're almost through it. So, no talk of this in the West, though, right? No talk of this in the West. That they try to resolve it diplomatically with very reasonable requests. Now, Putin delivers a speech. On March 19th, Putin delivers a speech. Crimean officials say the peninsula voting overwhelmingly in favor of the move in a referendum. Think about how that's even worded. Crimean officials say, as though it's disputed. They did. Everyone says. Crimea voted overwhelmingly in favor of joining Russia in a referendum. But they have to, even the BBC's like, well, Crimean officials said that. It sows doubt, right? And think about that verbiage, how they do that. That's on purpose. So he gives a speech and he says more than 82% of the electorate took part in the vote. Over 96% of them spoke out in favor of reuniting with Russia. These numbers speak for themselves. Everything in Crimea speaks of our shared history and pride. You know, he kind of talks about the history of the region. It's very, very interesting. And that's kind of it, right? This is Kiev. This is not in Crimea. So this is deceptive, what they've done here. Now, what's next is the last article. What happens next? A Ukrainian-Israeli billionaire begins aggressively funding anti-Russian paramilitary groups in eastern Ukraine as a result of this. They're worried. They get worried. Ukraine gets worried. They're like, okay, we lost Crimea, but there's a lot of other areas of Ukraine that have a large ethnically Russian population. And we're worried we're going to lose those too. Right? He says, one side... Okay, well, we'll talk about this here. Gennady Korbin grips a ballpoint pen and draws a squiggling blue line down the center of this map of Ukraine. The border, he said, marked the battlefront in his country's war with pro-Russian separatists. On one side, it's stable. Rid of troublemakers, he says. On the other side, maniacs. Men without families. They just like war. We'll have to kill them. He called the border Kolomoisky's line, after his billionaire boss, who is emerging as one of the more unlikely protagonists from Ukraine's fight for survival. He's a psychopath who arms neo-Nazis. How is this Ukraine's fight for survival? The wording of this is fucking insane, right? So this is what we'll talk about next time. And this is going to be mostly... Actually, I'm going to put this in a different area. We're going to put this in the Donbass as the first thing we'll start with next week when we get more into this. All right, so this is what we got going on for me. This is very, very interesting. The Donbass region thing is such a clear-cut example of the fact that this is a civil war and that many people in Ukraine didn't want this. When you look at that, coupled with the numbers of people who actually had good feelings about Russia, who missed communism, the outlawing of Communist Party, I mean, they really tried to fake it. There are people in Ukraine actively fighting against this in Crimea and the Donbass region. What do? They don't legitimize it. They don't say, actually, the Ukrainian people don't want this and we're stealing their country. No, they say, well, those are pro-Russian separatists. Those aren't even really Ukrainians, if you think about it. It's just all delegitimization. Crimea Chan. Oh, yeah, okay. I like that. Bye, Tuesday Blue. She's anti-war Russia now. Well, you know, whatever. It's like, I don't, love the war. I don't love that Russia invaded Ukraine, but also I don't know what else they were supposed to do. Like, I can idealistically be like, war bad. I don't think they should have done that. But realistically, who fucking knows? This shit's crazy. This shit is crazy. And you've got fucking liberals out here believing Russia and Donald Trump are friends. I've literally just said, let's see if I get an update on this before we go on my video. Let's see. I asked one guy. This one guy left a comment. He said, Donald Trump does support Russia. The U.S. government does not. The U.S. government exists long before Donald Trump. The U.S. government has done a lot of good things and the bad that Donald Trump didn't do. Tell me you know this. It has fucking 22 likes. I can't believe people like that. And I said, show me Trump supporting Russia. He is arming Ukraine. No response. I don't understand these fucking people, guys. I don't understand these fucking people. And somebody said, why are you sticking up for Donald Trump? They're deranged. They're crazy. They think it's defending Donald Trump to say he's siding with Ukraine. It's insane. They're crazy. They're crazy people. Sorry, I'm just tripping out. I'm tripping out right now. This is like I've just encountered flat earthers for the first time or something. That's the level of crazy I'm experiencing. I'm like tripped out on it. Like this is gonna be my whole lunch break. This is insane. It's just crazy. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Weird end. Got a little thrown off by that, guys. I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to learn that a significant portion of the population is, like, actually delusional. Like, I knew they were ding-dong. I didn't realize they were fucking delusional. I'm tripping out right now. Okay, whatever. You know what? I miss Twitter. I haven't been on a while. What is the function of villainizing Russia so hard in the West? Arms sales to Ukraine? I guess, yeah, I think so. I really think so. No, I know. Usually I'm pretty strong in the face of the liberals. This one threw me for a loop, guys. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, it's defending Trump to say he isn't arming Ukraine. Yeah, exactly. He's full of fucking Nazis. That's what I said. I told it in all caps. I said it. I yelled it because I'm losing my mind. I said, Ukraine is full of Nazis. This does not make Trump look good. Are you all crazy people? That's what I said in all caps. They are all crazy people. It's crazy. Okay, sorry. Guys, I'm struggling. I'm struggling right now. I'm so sorry. Yeah, okay. You know what? Let's raid Larry. Let's raid Larry and call it a day. Get me away from this. Crimea Chan. I think I remember Crimea Chan. I think I remember this. This sounds familiar. Yes, I do remember this. Yes. It's... Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah, this is old. This is an old one. Yay. Alright. Sorry, I'm freaking out. I'm not even in my brain right now. I'm not even here with you all chat. I am in the comment section of that video mentally. Nazi Ukraine for the L. Larry raid for the win. I'm sending one later. You don't have to go through this with me. This I can experience personally. I can experience this on my own. Go fucking hang with Larry. Tomorrow is going to be Wednesday. We're going to be talking about the news. Oh, after we're done with this? We can vote on what we would like to do. The masses would love DPRK, I am sure. We can vote, though, on what we want to do next. We can. All right. I can even make a new resource document for us about something we haven't done yet, like Tiananmen or something like that. I don't know. We got options. Okay. I'm sending you to Larry. I am not equipped right now to have any sort of present, real conversation. There's an underscore, right? He's been gone a week. Are Larry's pronouns he or they? I assume everybody's they. Larry's got a beard, though. That feels like he energy. Could be she energy, too. Somebody tell me Larry's pronouns before I crash the fuck out. I'll check. I'm having a rough one. Chat. Wish me luck. I need it. I need the luck today. Invalid username. Oh, it's one word. See? I knew it. Did it work? Did I do it? Oh my god, what is Larry's username? Why the fuck don't I know it? That's what I thought. I typoed it. I'm such a mess I typoed it. I'm freaking. Thank you, Caltimos. I'll figure it out. You guys go have fun without me while I crash the fuck out over this whole Blue Anon thing. And eat my lunch, you know. And I'll see you tomorrow when I'll be feeling better. Goodbye.